As we saw in the preceding section that dealt with remediation, the entire teaching approach for dyslexic individuals is dramatically different from the traditional method of teaching language skills. The intensity, pace, and depth is on an entirely different level in comparison. Students are given far more individual attention, and class sizes are also much smaller. There are 4 broad areas where basic skills are taught, and we'll now look at dyslexia teaching methods that address each of those. The 4 areas are language, spelling, reading, and writing. The key to teaching language skills to dyslexic students lies in slowness and thoroughness. This cannot be overstated. Of course, this also implies a very high level of patience and mental preparedness on the part of the teacher, which is why teaching dyslexic students should be done by a teacher who is also clinically trained. In this approach, the target language is broken up into its basic elements, and those elements are taught as lessons in and of themselves. They need to be practiced and mastered. These elements are the sounds and letters that go with them. Students are taught in detail how these are taken apart and put together. A multi-sensory approach is especially well suited to dyslexia students' learning. In this method, they learn to make a connection between speech sounds and letters or patterns of letters. When students learn a new letter or pattern this way, they will often repeat a number of words after the teacher that all contain the sound of the newly learnt letter. After this, they will look at the word written out where they can discover the newly learnt letter. Following this, they will trace the letters of the word, sounding each aloud as they go. Finally, they'll build words and phrases using the newly learnt sounds in order to improve fluency. This approach combines multiple learning pathways to strongly reinforce learning and mastery. It combines whole word methods with both tracing and phonetic methods. These are all approaches that sometimes get used in isolation to help non-dyslexic students who have difficulty learning particular concepts. But with dyslexic students, teaching these methods are used intensely and together. This approach transcends the basic levels of language as well. Students may start to bring in, for example, hand gestures to help them remember word definitions or spelling. Any other mental pathway that can supplement language processing is used in order to achieve normative fluency levels, or as near to that as possible. To summarise this multi-sensory approach to teaching, there are a number of principles that it can be boiled down to. Firstly, of course, is that simultaneous multi-sensory teaching is used. Secondly, teaching is systematic and cumulative. In other words, step by step, and each lesson builds on the previous one. Instruction is direct, and that simply means that we cannot take for granted that a dyslexic student will infer certain facts about language that a non-dyslexic student would. So language must be broken down into indivisible components and taught from there. The teaching must be highly adaptive and diagnostic. This isn't about executing a pre-planned curriculum for mass deployment. It's about teaching and assessing in a tight feedback loop and adjusting your teaching to match the needs of that student. Anything else is doomed to fail because we cannot expect the student to fill in the gaps that we leave or to catch up if we do not wait for them. This approach uses both synthetic and analytic teaching in parallel. The former teaches what the component parts of a language are and how they come together to form a whole. The latter teaches how the whole can be broken down into constituent parts. This is crucial since when a dyslexic person is confronted with language that is new, they will need both of these approaches in order to make sense of a new word or phrase without assistance. Teaching language in this context also requires that you be comprehensive and inclusive. This means that every level of language needs to be addressed in parallel. This may seem very intense, and it is, but remember that this is the most effective way to accommodate these students' needs and that your dyslexic students have no problems with their intelligence. If you challenge them in the right way, they will rise to it. Although this covers the general approach to language teaching with dyslexia, we'll briefly go over a few more specific issues.